Yeah, I think that's the contrast is like competing is always at the expense of like a thoughtful progression.
Yes.
So
Or at the end of it.
Or at the end of it. Yeah. But like it basically like tests the fitness that you've built.
Correct.
So if you're competing all the time, you don't have any time to build fitness.
Correct.
You're just competing.
Right.
The fitness movement is brought to you by Zor Fitness. We offer coaching and individualized program design, as well as educational content for coaches and athletes. It's all at one place, zorfitness.com.
Today, folks, we're talking about competing too much in CrossFit. So tell me, Ben, there's a common problem, I'll say, issue for people who start to get fairly competitive in CrossFit or people who enjoy competing, that they end up doing it all the time. Have you seen that?
For sure. It's not all my clients. Like we were saying, like you probably have like one or two or maybe a handful of clients who like this is a huge problem with, and the rest of the people, it's not an issue at all.
Right.
And it's just like the people who really feel the need that they need to do every single thing possible. Mm-hmm. And if they don't, they feel like they're missing out.
Right.
It's like classic FOMO.
Classic FOMO.
Yeah. Is there any like personality or like themes that you can see from like the people who are like wanting to compete all the time and like feeling the need to do that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, and just to create some context, these are people who, we're going to be talking about people who compete too much, who have competitive goals within the sport, right? There are people who compete too much that off air, we called it people who run the circuit, right? Where it's like, if you ever show up at a CrossFit I know for me, if I ever show up at a CrossFit competition in New Jersey, I'm like,
who's going to be
they're going to be there 100%. And it's like, they will be there. They will be there throwing down, almost throwing up, walking out, like
drinking beers afterwards.
Yep. Every single time. And it's like, for those people, a couple of things. One, they probably don't have at least any more goals to like compete better in the sport, but maybe they do. Maybe they're just whatever. But the second thing is like, I don't know how they do it, frankly. Like I would be throttled. Like
I think they are. I think that's the thing is that
they might be.
Yeah.
But so yeah, but for folks who want to get better or have skills they need to improve on or get better at the sport, I think there's a couple of things that go into that personality. One is they are obviously very competitive, right? So they thrive off of getting into an atmosphere to try to like beat people or push themselves, right? Two, they're usually like super social, like that FOMO. They don't want to miss out. Oh, that sounds super fun. Like I want to do that, right?
I feel like that's usually the reason why people sign up for that kind of stuff. It's like someone asked me to do it, or a bunch of people that I know are doing it, and I don't want to miss out.
Yep. But that leads into the third thing I was going to say is they have a horrible time saying no. They're just awful. I was going to make sure we noted that. Yeah, saying no. Because like you said, it's like so-and-so asks you, right? You want to do this local competition with me? It's a partner comp. Yeah, I'll totally do that. But these people, because they're generally social, have a fair number of friends or people they know at the gym who like competing with them, like being around them. So friend number two, who's not participating in competition number one, is now like, hey, I'm doing a competition a month later. You want to do it with me? Yeah, let's do that. Person number three, hey, I'm doing a team of 4 competition. You know, like you haven't done anything with me in so long. Like that's the week after that other one. Yeah, I'm in. And it's like, next thing you know, I'm working with a client. It's like, wait, what? It's like, and it's always a surprise. It's always like, hey,
by the way,
I signed up for this local comp.
Yeah.
It's like, oh.
There wasn't a conversation around it. Oh, by the way, I did this.
Yeah, it's fine. We were just going through a back squat progression and we were going to max out on Monday, but it's fine. Like we'll just take exactly what we did for the last 8 weeks and shoot it directly in the heart, right? You know? So yeah, those are probably the personality traits most common, I'd say.
Yeah. And so, I mean, counter to this would be someone who is like very methodical about how they go about planning their year and their athletic career as a whole. and they work very closely with their coach in doing that. Like asking their coach, like, hey, what do you think's best? This is my potential options of competitions that I have coming up in the next, 10 months or whatever, right? Next calendar year. And likely I plan on doing this. I'll probably get through this part of the game season, etc. And then it's like, okay, what do you think's a good frequency for me to do this? And like, there's just like a lot more conversation and dialogue around the whole thing.
Right.
So I think if you are someone who deals with the overcompeting thing, like you don't feel like you're letting people down, or you just want to do everything. It's like, we were talking about this, like, you can blame your coach.
100%.
And
I'm man enough
they're
to
all
take
going to
it.
be all for it.
Yep.
Yeah, like, please blame me.
Yeah.
But then also you can use that as sort of a fallback, like, hey, let me talk to my coach and I'll get back to you.
Yep.
Versus having to just straight up say no to their face. That can be awkward. I mean, I'm fine doing that sort of thing. Yeah. But for a lot of other people, for some reason, they experience this social anxiety around it.
It's like, like I just mentioned the scenario where hey, all right, I got 5 local comps lined up in the next 6 weeks, right? It's like
6 for 6.
Yeah. But it's like,
other one, I'm going out of town.
Right. There's travel involved.
Yeah.
But what's tough is like this person asks, right? And then what happens is the person who's getting asked, there's this weird thing that occurs where there's this intense amnesia occurs where they don't remember any of the other competitions they've ever signed up for. And it's like, yeah, I got nothing going on. So it's like that phrase, like, let me talk to my coach and get back to you, is huge, because then I can be like, okay, you want to do this now. All right. You have these other ones lined up and you told me these were your goals. Does adding another one to your calendar fit into these goals? Because I tell people, the couple people I've worked with who fall into this category, listen, at the end of the day, if your goal is, there was a meme or something years ago. It was like a little kid. He's like, I just want to do hood rat stuff with my friends. It's like, if that's your goal, is to just do hood rat stuff with your friends, and like, listen, I don't really care. I just want to go to local competitions and be part of the scene, work out with friends, have a beer after, limp my way home, and then do it again a couple weekends out of the year. Go for it, right? I'm not going to tell you no, unless obviously you have injuries or something like that.
Right.
But if your goal is like, no, I want to be as good at this sport as humanly possible, it's like, okay, well, you can't do that. Like, I'm sorry, it isn't like, and the problem is, in addition to this, and I've had this with athletes, they'll reference other athletes that, not like famous ones on Instagram, but like local ones who are like the good athletes locally. And they're like, well, I look up to so-and-so and they do every single competition. And like that conversation is tough, because it's like, I hear you and I know you think they're amazing, but I know.
But they're not.
But not only that, I know that what they're doing is suboptimal for the peak performance. Yeah. And so, yes, maybe they're the best locally, but that doesn't mean they're the best that they can be.
Right.
And that also doesn't mean that you have the hormone profile that they do to survive that beatdown.
Yeah.
And the movement quality that they have. And that's really tough. It's the comparison game can weigh tough as well.
Yeah. I think that's the contrast, is like, competing is always at the expense of like a thoughtful progression.
Yes.
So
or at the end of it.
Or at the end of it. Yeah. But like, so for example, like it basically like tests the fitness that you've built.
Correct.
So if you're competing all the time, you don't have any time to build fitness.
Correct.
You're just competing.
Right.
So again, if your goal is just to compete and like that's your thing, then it's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But if your goal is to improve, which is most people,
right, then
it's like at some point you have to block out time to improve,
100%.
Which means don't compete.
Right.
It means training.
Yeah. And we talked about it off air again, where it's like, I used to be too far the other way.
Yeah.
I don't care. I'll call him out. I used to, I took like OPEC certifications, and like, he's like very like, well, if you want to do the open season, that's what you do. And if you compete, it pulls away from it. It's like, not really, bro, because there is a competition muscle. Like, there is a muscle to the effect of like handling anxiety, game day jitters, for the online stuff, setting up a phone, making sure it's on airplane mode, not stressing out too much because you got to set up a camera. Like, all that plays into it.
Yeah.
But there's a sweet spot depending on the athlete and where they're at in their journey, that people in this category grossly overshoot.
Yeah. And there is a demographic of athlete who's listening right now who is on the opposite side of that.
Yeah.
Where they're like, oh, I don't think I'm ready to compete. I just, I'm afraid I'm not going to do well enough, or I get so much anxiety when I go to compete. It's like, you need to be competing.
Yes.
Like, if you want to compete and like that's one of your goals, it's like, you will not be prepared for the sport if all you ever do is train.
Right.
Like, you have to compete if you want to learn how to compete well. So I'm also agreed that like you can't be in the camp where it's like you have to have all the prerequisites of a games athlete before you're allowed to go express your competition.
Right.
It's like, no, like competing is its own skill. Like, if I hadn't ever done a quarterfinals or an open, I've never made it to a semifinal. It would be so much harder for me, even with better fitness, to go qualify for one of those things.
100%.
I would be so stressed, have so much anxiety. I wouldn't sleep for like a week beforehand. Yep. I wouldn't know how to operate. Like, I would have no tools in how to deal with the actual competition experience.
Correct.
So for different demographic, it's like you need to put yourself out there. I think generally people know who they are, though. Yeah. It's like, I have anxiety around competing. I don't want to do it, versus like, oh, this is great. I'm hanging out with my friends and like I'm on all these team competitions. It's like very clearly like those are two types of athletes. And I feel like the more you can involve your coach, have an intelligent conversation about it, and then start to like, okay, this is why we're doing these. And it's actually like a thought process behind it, and not just saying like, oh, this is going to be fun.
Yeah. And that's the draw of the local comp scene. It's fun, right? You get to throw down. And if you're a pretty good athlete, it's like, it feels good to like, oh, I won, or I finished second. And it's like, that's great. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like that, like if I signed up for a competition right now, it would be a local competition because I don't want to deal with all the travel and stuff like that. But if your goal is compete at the quarterfinals, push for a semifinal, or, I want to make it to a Wadapalooza or a Fittest Experience, or they're a semifinal now, but like back in the day, Granite Games, right? Where you have an intense online qualifier. People all over the world are doing it, right? You have to set time aside for that, and those local
that's its
comps,
own peak.
Yeah,
because most athletes aren't good enough to make it into that without peaking.
Right, and those local comps don't necessarily serve you there because more often than not, people who are going into that have already run the circuit. Right. It's not like most people don't come out of like, okay, hey, I've been doing class for a while. I think I might want to compete. I'm going to go to Wadapalooza. Like, it's like, let me go do this local comp.
Yeah.
And then that's what hooks them in. Right. And so it's like, you have to have the wherewithal and the ability, again, leveraging people like us, right. To be able to like, okay, hey, I feel uncomfortable saying no right now. I'm going to leverage my coach. He's not going to like it. She's not going to like it. Or let me talk to my coach. To have the reframe of like, does this serve the goals that you have? If the answer is yes, then go friggin' do it. But if the answer is no, you have to be able to say like, okay, this doesn't serve the goals that I have. It's okay saying no. And then focusing on the competitions that are on your calendar, because like you said, they work against a progression, even if it's a quote easy competition, right? I've heard that before. Oh, it's an easy competition. I'm like, what does that mean? Because it's still a competition.
So are you like, if you're going way ahead, you're just going to start to row real slow?
Yeah.
Like, is that what that means?
Because it's like, these are competitive people. And so you're still having the stress on your system because of the anxiety, right? Which is almost unavoidable. Yeah. The prep time for that. And then you get into the competition and you're still working out 3-4 times, even if it's an easy competition. It might be easy in terms of the level of athlete as compared to you.
Or movement selection,
correct,
or total events or something, but it's still a huge stressor to your system.
100%. And if you're not a games athlete, like there are games athletes that could probably go to a local competition and it's basically a training day, right?
But they also wouldn't have any anxiety around it.
None.
They would like emotionally, they'd be like flatlined.
And they'd actually have the ability to be like, oh, I hit a 315 on this complex. I beat second place by 20 pounds. My max is 375. Like, I'm good here, right? Yeah. They're mature enough to do that. These athletes we're talking about, they're super competitive. They're not mature enough to say, no, I don't want that to come out the wrong way, but they're going to get in and go ham. Right. Yeah. Like, and so they're going to come out and they're going to be sore, or maybe they're not that sore, but they don't realize that their CNS is shot you still need some time to recover from that. And that works against the work that you need to put in to maybe get the skills you don't have yet.
Yeah. This is kind of off topic, but it just popped into my head, so I'm going to say it anyway. One of the things I've noticed with a lot of clientele is that like people who have just done less total training, like haven't gone through like, building volume over the course of a couple of years where they're doing like double sessions, like many days in a week.
Yeah.
And like maybe even doing additional stuff outside of that. Like if you've been there, you're likely someone who understands that you can't get like super hyped up for every session.
Yes.
Like I used to like be like taking pre-workout all the time, doing all this stuff. And it's like, man, if you're doing double session days, you have to be able to just kind of roll into those. Mm-hmm. And like, even if they're super challenging, to be able to like, create a little bit of separation and be like, you know what, I can deal with the hormonal spike that happens from this, and I don't need a bunch of artificial things thrown into it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that athlete has a much better perspective. The person who understands that they can roll into a session and just do that, mm-hmm. they have a much better bandwidth, and like they can just kind of recognize like, if they need to like put out that sort of effort on like a competition like that, and then B, it's like if they do, they recognize that I have to take some time away from this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel like a lot more of the higher level athletes have been a lot more vocal about the fact that they take an off season and that they say no to a lot more competitions.
And I think I don't know the guy personally, but I was a big fan of him back in the day. I think Rich Froning and all the media on him unfortunately pushed people too far in the direction of not doing that, because
his off season's 2 days.
Right, but that's what it was. It was literally like he's on camera saying like, or his team like, Rich was hitting us up the day after the games or 2 days after the games, like, you guys want to work out. And
Elon Musk sleeps 2 hours a night.
But it's like he's not only is he unique in that, right? And he's admitted on podcasts so publicly that like he's like, I had no balance when I was
that's what I was joking at.
Right. But you also don't know, like, he might have quote worked out the next day, but this is what people don't realize: what does that workout look like?
Yeah.
There's a difference.
And relative to his level of fitness and his tolerance.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like he once said he did a rowing thing. I remember watching this thing. It was like 2 days before the games, and he did a long row workout. And his sole reason to do it was he's like, I was just so close to having 1 million meters accumulated over the year that I was like, let me just polish that off. And it's like, think about that for a second. 1 million meters rowed. And I might be exaggerating the number, but it was in the vicinity.
Yeah.
And like when you've rowed 1 million meters, like your tissue tolerance is through the roof.
Just in your box alone.
Right. Calloused butt.
Oh my gosh. Oh, crying. That's so true, though.
It is. But fortunately, I think a guy like Matt Fraser set things in the other direction, where he's like, when I won the games, I did not work out. I didn't do anything for a month. He's like, I went away to a cabin and shot guns and slept as late as I want, ate whatever I want, because I needed a break. And he's arguably the most dominant male CrossFit athlete of all time, right? And so, now we're at a point where everyone is open that they take an off season, right? Now you had the two extremes: Rich, who works out 2 days later, and Matt who does literally nothing. And I think the best is probably somewhere in between, where it's like you're working out, maybe you're taking class, right? You're moving, you're doing some bodybuilding, you're staying active, you're staying fit, but you're letting your body and your brain reset, because there's also been interviews at semifinals and stuff where people are like, I had to take some time off between quarterfinals and semis because, I had a little tweak because I did Wadapalooza into another competition and then hit these qualifiers.
It's like I carried this little nagging injury with me from this competition that I did, and then I didn't really have a full off season, so I kind of never resolved that. Yeah, and now I'm still dealing with it as I'm going into this season. Yeah, So, I mean, frankly, that's like one of the big things is like if you're going through competition prep and competing, just the stress on your system and the chance of injury is so much higher.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, the goal is to prepare you to go maximally, and in the process of doing that, you do that a lot more often in competition prep. So it's not that it's less intelligent. It's just that you have to be prepared for what you're going to do, and that's not a sustainable thing.
Right. And so, as long as you connect to your why and what your goals are, and leverage the people around you, it's like, okay, you can say no to some of these things.
I'm still thinking about the butt
I say why.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think this kind of wraps it up. I mean, you got anything else to add?
No, I don't.
Just run to get a callous butt.
Oh man. Well, thanks, man.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
That was so funny.
Man. I haven't laughed like that in a while. Thanks for listening today. If you're someone who just found the show, I would encourage you to subscribe so you can stay up to date. If you're someone who's been listening for a while and enjoying what you're hearing, I would encourage you to leave a rating or a review for the show. It would definitely help us out. And lastly, if you're someone who does take your fitness seriously and cares about your performance deeply, I would encourage you to look into hiring one of our coaches. Until next time, stay the course.